started with a purpose: to bring robotic-assisted surgery to more people in more places than ever before. Hugo, robotic-assisted surgery is possibility at hand.
So as you guys are going through kind of the early steps of what you're doing from kind of work in this class and stuff like that, that's something that, you know, ultimately you guys can end up doing development work or design work or engineering work on as you kind of are learning the early steps and stages of kind of that work and that care pathway right now as far as this stuff is concerned. So from my end, I mean, I think it's definitely extremely exciting, as Dr. Wolf pointed out. You know, they are actually doing these surgeries right now. They have done some remotely, but just from Medtronic's standpoint, have you guys ever heard of Medtronic at all before? What do you know about Medtronic? So it's a medical device company that started with a cardiac pacemaker, essentially. So when patients who didn't have, you know, necessary heartbeats or heart rhythms needed surgery in 1960s, if they didn't have a device, they would plug their device into a wall and the power went out, they would die. So a doctor and an engineer came up with a device that was actually battery powered, so individuals would not necessarily die if there was a storm and the power went out in the hospital. So that was back in 1960, 65 years ago. And they've continued to innovate through different modalities like this stuff over the last 50, 60 years. But, you know, what are you guys' from my end, I'm really only here to kind of talk to you about anything you guys want to hear or know about or learn about from me. Right? I went to school at St. Paul, went to Harding, grew up kind of same type of background, same type of path that you guys have in front of you as far as getting into college and things like that. Didn't know anything about biomedical engineering when I was in high school. Learned about it really, I was fortunate enough to go to the U. Got to the U and learned about the program and kind of got into that field and then really started to dive into what a career in med tech would end up looking like. And so, again, from my end, very fortunate to have taken classes like this, worked with teachers like this early on, had an interest in science and math, and really just kind of carried down that path. But from an areas of interest standpoint, or things that you guys are considering where you're at right now. So what are you guys thinking about as far as you guys are going through these classes with the robotics platforms or anything like that, or areas of interest that you guys have? Anybody want to throw anything out there? I feel like, you know, it's really about exploration, right? And I think you guys are kind of getting exposure to that right now, but no, I think that's where, if I look at the arc of my career, kind of how I ended up getting to a place where I can work and talk to the CEO of Medtronic and talk about, like, well, what are we doing with the robotics platform, or what are we doing with these different technologies? You know, it's very humbling, and just to know that, you know, you have that platform. And I don't think I ever would have got to that point if I didn't necessarily kind of push and pursue something that I wasn't really comfortable in. You know, and I think it's encouraging to me. I think the more and more you get exposed to different things you don't know about, the more and more it expands your horizons to kind of have to see, like, okay, well, there is something like a robot that can perform surgery without actually having to touch a patient or do something like that that's being built right now. And that's maybe an area of interest, or maybe it's not. And maybe it's like, I want to build cell phones for Apple, or I want to program search engines for Google.
Hello, I'm Armando Mitchell. I lead neurosciences, business development and strategy for Medtronic.
Hey, Mr. Mitchell, thank you for coming to North High School today. What advice would you give a high school student getting into technology?
You know, I think from my perspective, one of the biggest things high school students can do getting into any type of tech or STEM field is, as you're going through high school, continue to kind of take the coursework that's necessary. So the math and science courses that you would need to be prerequisites for stuff you get into college, but also getting exposure to different areas. I was just talking to a class in here about, I didn't really have a lot of exposure before I got into the field that I ended up going into from Medtronic's perspective. Didn't know anything about medical devices, didn't know anything about engineering really. I think the more and more you leverage programs like Minnesota STEM Partner and alternatives like that, the more exposure you get, the more you'll broaden your horizons and have opportunity in front of you. So I would highly encourage you guys and your teachers to continue to move forward with that, with those offerings and initiatives, and kind of leverage those as they come about.
All right, well, thank you for the plug, and you have a wonderful day. Thank you for coming out.
No worries. Thank you.
All righty, we'll see you next semester.
All right, bye-bye.